Hi everybody. This week we're going to talk about data sufficiency questions, and I wanted to walk through an example of one of these types of questions. These questions can be particularly tricky because we can be tempted to actually solve the problem instead of just determining if we can or cannot solve the problem. So the example that we're going to walk through is question number 245 on page 276 of the Official Guide for GMAT Review 2017. So this question states, 3 houses are being sold through a real estate agent. What is the asking price for the house with the second largest asking price? We have 2 pieces of information given. Statement number 1 is the difference between the greatest and the least asking price is $130,000. Statement number 2 is the difference between the 2 greater asking prices is $85,000. Now for data sufficiency questions, we want to keep in mind the directions and the answer choices. These are 2 key pieces of information to keep in mind. The answer choices are always going to be the same for data sufficiency questions. So if you memorize those answer choices before going into the test, you won't have to spend time reading the answer choices. You can automatically start eliminating choices once you start working through the problem. So let's review those answer choices. Answer choice A is always statement 1 alone is sufficient, but statement 2 alone is not sufficient. B, statement 2 alone is sufficient, but statement 1 alone is not sufficient. C, both statements together are sufficient, but neither statement alone is sufficient. D, each statement alone is sufficient. And E, statements 1 and 2 together are not sufficient. So for this question, the first thing we want to do is look at statement number 1. Statement number 1 says, the difference between the greatest and the least asking price is $130,000. So I like to look at this question algebraically. I've assigned a variable to each of my 3 houses. In the book, answer explanation, I think they've used X, Y, and Z. I find it easier to use G, M, and L. That makes sense to me. You can use whatever variables make sense to you, but I've assigned G as the greatest priced house, M as the middle priced house, and L as the least priced house. The reason I did this is because when I'm looking at my equations, G, L, and M tell me immediately what those houses are. X, Y, and Z don't. So I feel like if I assigned my houses random variables, I would have to waste time looking back to see which variable I've assigned to which house. But by assigning a variable that makes sense in my mind, I can eliminate a little bit of time. So when I look at my equation that I can get from statement number 1, I get G minus L equals $130,000. The greatest priced house minus the least priced house equals $130,000. So what are we trying to answer? What is the asking price for the house with the second largest asking price? Our equation again from statement number 1 is G minus L equals $130,000. We have 2 variables. We only have 1 equation. We don't have any additional information, so we can't solve this. We can't get any more information than we already have. That tells me that statement 1 alone is not sufficient. Based on that information, we can eliminate answer choices A and D. Now let's look at statement number 2. The difference between the 2 greater asking prices is $85,000. I still have my same variables for my 3 houses. I can now get the equation G minus M equals $85,000. Again, what are we trying to answer? What is the asking price for the house with the second largest asking price? Our equation again is G minus M equals $85,000. We have 2 variables. We have 1 equation. We don't know any additional information. We can't solve for any additional information, and therefore we know that statement 2 alone is not sufficient. Based on that, we can now eliminate answer choice B in addition to answer choices A and D. That means our answer is either going to be C or E. If for some reason you couldn't go on beyond this point, you didn't know what to do as the next step, at least you've narrowed it down to 2 answer choices. Now you've got a 50-50 chance of getting the correct answer instead of 1 in 5. So if you couldn't go on, you could at least make an educated guess. But we're going to go on and look at the 2 pieces of information together and see if we can determine anything else. So now let's look at statements 1 and 2 together. Again, what is the asking price for the house with the second largest asking price? We now have 2 equations. We have our statement number 1 equation, G minus L equals $130,000. We have our statement number 2 equation, G minus M equals $85,000. So can we find out the asking price for the house with the second largest asking price? That's my middle priced house, that's M. Looking at these 2 equations, I can see I have 3 variables and only 2 equations. I don't have any additional information. There's no way that I can solve this set of equations. So therefore, I know that answer E is correct. Statements 1 and 2 together are not sufficient. If you have any questions about this or about any other data sufficiency questions or any other questions at all, please email them to me or post them to the Ask Your Instructor thread in the classroom.